What's up, my dude?
Hi.
Got a special guest joining us today. This is the man, Brody. Scored a touchdown in his first flag football game. Ran to the outside, so it's that time of year. Kids are playing football. Kids are going back to school. Things are getting cooler out. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about temperature and some swings that we're seeing. We actually saw water temperature dip back into the 60s. This is surface temp, of course, but still, regardless, it is the beginning for the most part. It's not even dead center of September yet, and we're seeing water temps drop back down into the 60s. And some of these fish are starting to focus on fall patterns. So some of the ways we caught them in the last week felt like fall. Spinner baits, chatterbaits, swim jigs, even some buzz baits, some frogs. That's a monster frog. That's as big as your head, and you'd probably catch a big bass on it. So some of the ways we caught these fish, we slowed down a bit if we're fishing artificials, whether it's a wacky rig or a jig. Otherwise, honestly, if we were looking to get the quantity bite, we turned to impulse baits, whether that was a chatterbait, spinner baits like we'll talk about here. We caught them on swim jigs, we caught them on a few buzz baits, caught them on Ned Rigs, which catches a fish all the time, bass specific. But we'll talk about some stuff. What do you think, buddy? You excited? You gonna catch some more big fish before we're done? Yeah? Or are you too focused on scoring touchdowns? He says touchdowns, of course. What other, second grader is thinking about right now is touchdowns, not catching fish. But so moving on. So like I said, water temps are cooling down. We caught fish a variety of ways. We saw some patterns start to develop, but I wouldn't say we're in full fall swing quite yet. But we did catch some fish on spinner baits, like I said, chatterbaits. And I'm going to show you a couple options here that we're getting our fish to go on. For starters, spinner baits have been working really well. If I can get some of these two rods untangled here. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I feel like I'm on the boat on a guide trip. There we go. For starters, we caught fish. Easy way to catch them is a cast and retrieve bait. One option was spinner bait. Just throw in the spinner bait. Natural colors like sexy shad, something bait fish pattern. You can catch them on anything. I know some guys out there, Larry Hansen put a post on Facebook. He was catching them on what you would kind of consider a purple spinner bait, tequila sunrise type stuff. Big R bend spinner baits. I know Larry was out there crushing them on Minnetonka this whole week. But spinner baits are catching a pile of fish. Easy bait to fish. You cast it, you reel it in. It's that simple. Same thing with the chatterbait. The other option for a cast and simple retrieve bait, just very easy to fish. Like I said, is that chatterbait. Cast it in, reel it back. It works well from 2 feet to 10 feet of water, really, and a lot of fish are in that 4 to 8 foot range right now. And we're just throwing them on bait casting rods, whether it's 6.5 foot to 7.5 foot medium heavy action rod. This one happens to have some 30-pound braid on it. You can fish fluorocarbon, whatever your personal preference is. And then we're fishing 150 or 200 series Shimano bait casting reels. This happens to be that new SLX DC. Super price conscious reel, but it's digitally controlled. I talked about this one before. Super great setup. This actually happens to be Jack's setup. Ben has the same setup. So for kids getting into the sport, I know it's an investment on a reel like that. You are still going to spend $200, but it's something they're going to fish a long time. It's something I would fish. It's not really an entry-level reel, but that digitally controlled aspect allows them to get a little more out of their casting. They're still learning how to do some of that stuff. That works out really well. Swim jigs, like I said, the all-terrain swim jig got a ton of attention in my boat this last week. I love fishing that because I can retrieve that back to the boat the entire time and get that tail, depending on what you put on the back end of that, kicking around, doing some things. Or you can fish it slow and literally swim it back to the boat. And you can fish that bait a number of ways. So that seems to catch a lot of a fish. I know Brody likes these. What's that? Frog. Frogs are starting to catch some fish. Just a fun way to catch them. As the fish move shallow, you can throw a frog. You get some. Well, look at the size of yours compared to mine. Your frog would eat my frog. That would be bad. But the fish would eat your frog too, so that would be good. So frog fishing is a fun way to fish. You can frog fish for the next month, if not longer. So that could be something you can deploy. But you got a jig there. Brody liked the jig fish. You've caught giants on jigs, haven't you? So Brody's got a jig there. That was a football jig he was holding in his hand, but you can still flip a jig, do all that sort of stuff. Which one's you got? That one is one of my coolest baits I've ever seen. We should show that through this. You love this one, don't you? Mm-hmm. I believe that's that live target. Check this thing out. You've probably seen this. Look at it. Looks like a bunch of minnows. How cool is that? Loud rattles. Brody just got this one. We're going to try this one out, and I bet you catch a giant fish. Isn't that cool? I would almost be scared to not even fish that because we don't want to lose it. What do you want to do? Want to fish it? Catch a big fish? Yeah. We're going to fish it. So there you go, buddy. That's a lipless crankbait. That's another great way to fish here soon. As the season starts to progress, the weeds start to lay down, and you can fish some of those lipless crankbaits. What do you got there? Oh, stick baits from Juice Bait Company, the Bar Boys. Throw some wacky rigs with that, can't you, dude? Oh, there you go. Wacky rig fishing, of course, can catch a bunch of fish. We also talked about Ned rigs, and again, I had a question pop up after the last video because I mentioned Ned rigs, and some people are still familiarizing themselves with what that concept is. And I'll show you exactly what a Ned rig is. It's just a smaller version, really, jig worm. And all you take is your favorite stick bait, and I'll use a Kamita oftentimes and bite a couple inches off and drop it down to 3 inches. And then your favorite head. And you can use a variety of jig heads. Most companies make them. I use a lot of times an all-terrain Mighty jig, but you can use jigs from Z-Man, Tackle, Swagger, Tungsten. I mean, so many brands out there have cool, good jig heads for Ned rigs, but Ned rig is just a modified, Jack was fishing this one, just a modified jig worm or shortened jig worm, generally using a stick bait, like a Senko type bait. And you can see it's fishing a smaller presentation. It's designed to be fished on the bottom, slow, sometimes dead sticked. And it's just another way to throw that jig worm type feel at a fish where you're kind of doing nothing. Ned rigs are designed to be fished very slow. You're not aggressively fishing them back to the bait. Generally speaking, they're fished on a spinning rod. I know Jack's got 20-pound braid on here with a fluorocarbon leader, throwing that Ned rig around and catching fish doing that way. So Ned rigs will catch fish, honestly, from May all the way until it's too cold to fish in the boat. You'll catch fish on Ned rigs in the river in October, November as well. So what do you got there, dude? Ooh, your box of jigs. Brody's got an awesome selection of jigs there. Which one's your favorite out of that box? What's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? Oh, the Mop Jig. This is a Mop Jig. I don't know if you've heard of that term before. It's called a mop because look at it. It looks like a mop. Look at that. All that skirt material, sometimes that big profile bait drug or hopped across the bottom looks like a really, really tasty crayfish. So Mop Jigs catch a bunch of fish. I know some guys cast some checks on these Mop Jigs. So there you go, Mop Jig, Brody's favorite today. So lots of great options to catch fish. What I anticipate this next week, we're actually gonna see a warm up. This last week's been very cold. I've been pretty much living in sweatshirts, and my Gale pullover, my Blackfish Gale soft shell has been on me every day. Either I start the day or I end the day, or I'm at football practice with the boys and I'm wearing it. So this has been comfortable weather, almost a little cold to be honest. I mean, it was 34 degrees the other day on my way to work. So things are definitely cooling off, but don't worry, this next week ahead of us, I think I saw a couple days in the 80s. So we're gonna bring the shorts back out, the UPF shirts, and probably some sunscreen, that kind of stuff. We're gonna get a little more taste of that before fall really kicks in. And I expect water temps to warm back up. Why not? We're in Minnesota. Why expect anything consistent? It hasn't been that way ever. Why should it start now? So I expect us to continue with these same patterns there. You're not gonna see, again, a big swing with these fish. You're gonna just move back into summer patterns. It's not gonna happen. I don't expect them to go way back deep, drop shot and deep weed lines. I think the days of that consistent bite is behind us. And I think you can get close to shore. I think you can start focusing on some shallower patterns, still throwing some jigs in the weed lines, still flipping some milfoil. That still exists out there. That's still going on. But if you're finding me in the boat, you're probably going to see some impulse baits, some swim jigs, some swim baits, some spinner baits. A lot of fish are starting to move into those zones, and I anticipate that to continue as we move into the end of September, the next couple weeks, and move into October. And I think it's going to be big fish time. Right, Brody? Oh, you can catch one big as you. Piker chow, the piker shell. It's fishy. There's a lot of opportunities for kids like this to get out and catch some fish and outfish dad and mom and grandpa and grandma and all their buddies. Because that's the goal, right? You usually catch more than me. Even if it's the biggest weed. You tell them about your giant weed you caught at the cabin 2 weeks ago. It was like 16 feet long. You didn't tell them about that one? Should we show them a picture? Should we throw a picture up of that big weed you caught? It was as long as the boat. So really big one. We got a picture of that giant weed. So super excited for this next week. I'll be kind of all over the place. Minnetonka, Chisago area, We'll be maybe over on West Metro again, Annandale area, and hopefully next week I got a more diverse report for you. Oh yeah, you got your ice jigs. He's already thinking ice fishing, and maybe we'll target some panfish. I haven't done that at all this last week. It's been primarily bass fishing and pike, or just taking guys on guide trips, targeting whatever bites. So looking forward to another good week. You have more football. Maybe when we talk to them next week, you can tell them you scored another touchdown. What do you think? Never know. What do you want to say? You got anything for the camera before we log off for the day? Tom Brody, what's one good tip you have for all these people checking you out? The big frog. He goes back to the big frog. Let me see that thing real quick and we'll show them. This is how we'll end. You see how big this thing really is. You maybe can't tell. Look at that thing. There's my hand. That is a big frog. I think we should throw this in a couple weeks and see if we can catch a giant. What do you think? Let's do it. And there he is throwing the Vexlar logo, thinking ice fishing already. It's hard not to. What do you say? So, what do you think? Should we talk to him next week? All right. See you. Bye. Go catch some fish. Bye, Brody.
Bye.